Love does not reveal a person's heart when the room is kind. It reveals it when someone weaker is being humiliated and everyone powerful chooses whether to look away. The first splash of cold water struck Nora Bennett across the cheek before the orchestra had even finished its song. 100 conversations died at once. Ice slid from her dark curls, down the collar of her gray uniform, and onto the polished marble floor of the De Luca estate in Westchester County, an hour north of Manhattan. Across from her, Vivienne Laurent still held the empty crystal glass between two elegant fingers, her smile calm enough to make the cruelty worse. Perhaps now you'll remember your place. Nora did not move. That was what surprised the room. She did not wipe her face. She did not apologize. She simply looked at the woman wearing a diamond engagement ring large enough to pay her mother's medical bills for 3 years. 10 minutes earlier, Nora had been carrying a tray through the engagement gala when she noticed an elderly guest reaching for a plate containing walnut oil. The woman's medical bracelet listed a severe allergy. Nora had replaced the dish, found the chef, and prevented a celebration from ending in an ambulance ride. The delay had lasted 4 minutes. Vivienne had treated it like an act of rebellion. "You abandoned your station," she announced, making sure the donors, politicians, and executives nearby could hear. Nora set down her tray with careful hands. A guest could have gone into anaphylactic shock. Vivienne's eyes traveled slowly over Nora's curvy figure, the inexpensive uniform, the damp curls escaping her bun. Then perhaps the hospital would have finally found a use for all that dramatic concern. A few guests laughed because wealthy people often mistook cruelty for wit when it wore diamonds. Nora's mouth curved, but there was no humor in it. "I'm sorry dinner was delayed. I'm not sorry she can still breathe." That was when Vivienne picked up the water. Now silence pressed against the ballroom walls. At the top of the staircase, Matteo De Luca had seen everything. He stood beneath the shadow of the second-floor balcony in a black tuxedo, one hand resting against the railing. He did not rush down. He did not raise his voice. His dark gaze moved across the guests instead, cataloging who smiled, who turned away, and who looked ashamed. Enzo Ricci, his head of security, followed his stare. "You're memorizing faces." Matteo began descending the stairs. "I'm learning who feels safe enough to laugh in my house." Nora finally lifted a napkin, but Vivienne caught her wrist. "I wasn't finished." Nora looked down at the jeweled fingers touching her skin. "You are now." A quiet breath moved through the crowd. Vivienne's expression hardened. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" A woman holding an empty glass. Somewhere behind them, Rosa Bellini covered a smile with her hand. Matteo reached the final step just as an ice cube slipped from Nora's collar and landed near his shoe. He bent, picked it up, and dropped it back into Vivienne's glass. The small sound of ice against crystal seemed louder than a gunshot. "You just humiliated someone under my protection." Vivienne gave a disbelieving laugh. "Matteo, she's a maid." His attention shifted to the diamond on her left hand. The room seemed to shrink around that look. "And you," he murmured, "just gave me a reason to reconsider the woman I was planning to marry." The silence after Matteo's words was not empty. It was the sound of a room realizing the balance of power had shifted. Vivienne stared at him as if he had slapped her without lifting a hand. "You're embarrassing me over staff." Matteo's expression did not change. "No, you embarrassed yourself. I'm simply refusing to hide it." Nora's wet uniform clung uncomfortably to her shoulders, and every instinct told her to leave before this became worse. But Matteo turned toward the stage where a gold-framed sign announced their wedding date. "Take it down." 2 employees froze. Enzo lifted one brow. "Now," Matteo added, and the sign disappeared within seconds. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Vivienne's face tightened. "You cannot be serious." Matteo stepped closer, his voice low enough to force everyone else into silence. "Apologize to Nora. I will do no such thing." "Then the wedding is postponed indefinitely." A champagne flute slipped from someone's hand near the back of the room, but no one looked away from the couple at its center. Nora felt the weight of 100 curious eyes and hated it. She had not asked to become the moral test of a powerful man's engagement. She lifted her chin toward Matteo. "I don't need you to ruin your wedding for me." His gaze moved to her, softer but no less intense. "This isn't for you alone. That makes it worse." For the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Regret, perhaps. He reached into his pocket and offered her a folded white handkerchief. Nora looked at it, then at him. I don't need your pity. Good. His voice dropped. I wasn't offering any. A drop of water slid from her temple toward her cheek. Matteo raised the handkerchief, then stopped inches from her skin. May I? The question unsettled her more than an order would have. Men like Matteo De Luca were not known for asking permission. Nora gave one cautious nod. He touched the cloth to her cheek with surprising care, wiping away a single drop before stepping back. The gesture was brief, restrained, and somehow more intimate than it had any right to be. Behind them, Enzo leaned toward Rosa. I've seen him look less nervous with a loaded gun. Rosa watched Matteo fold the handkerchief with unnecessary precision. Guns don't tell him no. Nora heard them and almost smiled despite herself. Vivian did not. She yanked off her engagement ring and pressed it into Matteo's palm. You'll regret choosing a maid over an alliance. I haven't chosen anyone. Matteo closed his fingers around the ring. I've rejected cruelty. Vivian turned sharply and walked away, her heels striking the marble like warning shots. The orchestra remained silent. Matteo dismissed the guests with a glance, and the ballroom slowly began to breathe again. Nora escaped upstairs to change, desperate for dry clothes and distance. In the staff room, she removed her soaked apron and reached into the pocket for her locker key. Her fingers closed around something flat and metallic. A black access card. Matteo's private office was printed across the back. Nora's stomach dropped. She had never seen it before. Then Rosa appeared in the doorway, pale and holding a tablet. Nora, she whispered, turning the security footage toward her. On the screen, Vivian stood behind Nora minutes before the incident, slipping the card into her apron pocket. Matteo watched the security footage twice, without blinking. On the screen, Vivian's hand disappeared into Nora's apron pocket, then withdrew empty. In the office, the Real Nora stood across from his desk with the black access card resting between them like evidence in a trial. I didn't take it. Matteo leaned back, his gaze unreadable. I know. Her shoulders remained tense. Then don't question me like a suspect. I question everyone. That doesn't make it respectful. Enzo shifted near the door, clearly expecting the temperature in the room to drop. Instead, Matteo folded his hands. What would you have me do? Nora pushed the tablet toward him. Review every camera angle. Check my locker. Search my bag in front of Rosa. Then document that I had nothing to do with this. You're not asking me to trust you. Trust is convenient for powerful people. Proof protects everyone. Something changed behind Matteo's eyes. Most employees begged when their jobs were threatened. Nora demanded a fair process. And after your name is cleared? She removed the staff badge from her uniform and placed it beside the card. I resign. Matteo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Because of Vivian? Because I won't spend every shift wondering what she'll plant next. She won't be permitted near you. Nora gave him a tired look. That sounds like protection. It also sounds like I'm becoming another problem you intend to control. The words landed harder than anger would have. Matteo rose and walked around the desk, stopping far enough away that she did not have to step back. Stay 7 days. No, hear the reason first. His restraint made her pause. Rosa is coordinating the Harbor Light charity benefit next week. Half the staff was hired through you, and several guests have medical accommodations only you track correctly. Leave after the event, with full pay and a written recommendation. Nora studied him. 3. Conditions. Enzo looked toward the ceiling as if silently asking for patience. Matteo nodded once. Name them. My pay is in writing. No security follows me after work. And you do not interfere with my personal life. Agreed. The speed of his answer unsettled her. You didn't even negotiate. Some terms shouldn't require negotiation. For one dangerous second, the room felt too small. Nora became aware of how close he stood, of the quiet control in his voice, of the fact that he had not looked away from her since she entered. She picked up her badge before that awareness became something worse. Rosa appeared moments later carrying a small red notebook. She handed it to Matteo with the solemnity of a court summons. Across the cover, she had written, "Things not to do when trying to earn a woman's trust." Matteo opened to the first page. "Do not buy her an apartment without asking," he read aloud. Enzo cleared his throat. Excellent timing. Matteo looked at him. I had considered it. Nora's mouth twitched. And that is exactly why the book exists. The brief laughter died when Enzo's phone vibrated. He checked the screen, and all humor vanished from his face. East Shipping Yard. Someone sabotaged the loading system and burned 2 storage records. Matteo took the phone. The first image showed damaged equipment. The second showed a grainy security frame of Adrian Laurent standing beside a vehicle registered to Vivian's family. Matteo's expression went cold. Nora saw it then. The man behind the tailored suit. The one entire rooms were afraid to disappoint. He enlarged the image and spoke without looking up. Vivian didn't plant that card to get Nora fired. Enzo's eyes narrowed. She wanted access blamed on her. Matteo turned the phone toward them. Because her brother was already inside my operation. Power rarely announced itself with shouting. In Matteo De Luca's world, the most dangerous decisions were usually made in rooms where no one raised his voice. By midnight, 6 men sat around the closed dining room of a restaurant Matteo owned in Lower Manhattan, their untouched coffee cooling between them. Enzo placed photographs from the East Shipping Yard. Across the table, damaged control panels, missing manifests. Adrian Laurent beside a black sedan registered to Vivian's family. The sabotage wasn't meant to destroy the terminal, Enzo explained. It was meant to delay 3 contracts and make our partners question stability. One of the older men leaned forward. Then we answer before Laurent thinks we're weak. Matteo's fingers rested against the edge of the photograph. No one touches Adrian. No one threatens the Laurent family. Not until I know who inside my organization opened the gate for him. A captain near the end of the table gave a humorless laugh. Mercy is expensive in our business. Matteo lifted his eyes. One of the men stopped stirring his coffee. That wasn't mercy. His voice remained almost gentle. It was an order. The man looked away first. Back at the mansion, Nora carried invoices toward Rosa's office and heard Matteo's name through a half-closed library door. Vivian stood inside with her attorney, speaking too quietly for Nora to catch every word. The marriage stabilizes the ports, the attorney warned. If Matteo cancels now, the labor agreements unravel, investors panic, and hundreds of employees could lose their jobs. Vivian crossed her arms. Then he won't cancel. He needs my family more than he needs a maid's approval. Nora stepped back before the door could open, but the words followed her down the hall. So that was the truth. Matteo's defense in the ballroom had not been some moral stand. It had been leverage in a negotiation larger than she could understand. By morning, she met him in the breakfast room with a stack of event schedules and none of the warmth she had almost allowed herself the night before. Matteo glanced up from his phone. You're avoiding me. I'm working. You were working yesterday. You still looked at me. Nora placed the schedules in front of him. Maybe I learned better. His expression sharpened. What did you hear? Enough to know your engagement isn't about love. It never was. And defending me gave you an advantage over Vivian. Matteo rose slowly. You think I used what she did to you? I think powerful men are very good at making strategy look like kindness. The accusation hung between them. For once, Matteo had no immediate answer. Enzo entered before the silence could deepen, carrying a tablet. We found something else. Vivian accessed Nora's personnel file 3 times in the month before the gala. Home address, family contact, employment history. Matteo's face went cold. Why? Nora stared at the screen, then remembered the afternoon she had delivered flowers to Vivian's private sitting room. A framed photograph had been lying beside the window. Adrian Laurent shaking hands with a gray-haired man whose face Nora knew from every memorial article Rosa kept hidden in the estate archives. The man blamed for arranging the ambush that killed Matteo's father. Matteo noticed the change in her expression. What did you see in Vivian's room? Nora's first instinct was to deny everything. Then she met his eyes and understood that the engagement ring was not hiding a marriage. It was hiding a war. A photograph, she whispered. Her brother was standing beside the man who killed your father. Nora expected Matteo's anger to fill the room. Instead, it disappeared beneath something colder. He asked for every detail, the frame, the angle, the man beside Adrian. But when Enzo suggested moving her to a guarded suite, Nora stepped back. No, I am not becoming a witness you lock upstairs for my own good. Matteo's jaw tightened. Someone searched your records. Vivian knows where your mother lives. Then protect my mother. Give me choices. Do not turn me into property because you're afraid. The word struck a place few people dared touch. Matteo held her gaze for several seconds before sliding his phone across the table. 3 options were already listed: private transportation, temporary housing, or additional security at her apartment. Choose what you can live with. Nora selected security for her mother and nothing for herself. He clearly hated the decision, but he accepted it. That evening, while Vivian attended a museum fundraiser, Nora followed Matteo into the private wing of the mansion. The plan was simple: enter Vivian's sitting room, photograph the framed image, and leave before her driver brought her home. Simple plans, Nora had learned, were usually the ones most likely to become disasters. The photograph was gone. Matteo searched the desk while Nora studied the room. Everything was arranged with the precision of a magazine spread, except the writing table. Thin scratches marked the hardwood beneath one leg. That desk moves often. Matteo crouched beside her. There's no reason to move it. Then someone has a reason they don't want seen. Together, they shifted it several inches. A narrow panel had been cut into the wall behind it. Inside lay shipping contracts bearing forged De Luca signatures, payment records tied to Adrian, and a typed list of employees who had accepted money. Matteo photographed each page, his expression turning more dangerous with every name. This could dismantle half my operation. Nora picked up the final sheet. Or show you which half was never really yours. A sharp alarm sounded in the hallway. Matteo killed the lamp and caught her hand, guiding her behind the heavy curtains as footsteps approached. The space was barely wide enough for both of them. Nora's back touched the wall. Matteo planted one hand beside her head, keeping his body from pressing against hers, though the heat between them had nowhere to go. "Do you always stand this close to women during investigations?" she whispered. His eyes lowered briefly to her mouth. No, that answer came suspiciously fast. The question was easy. The footsteps paused outside the door. Nora stopped breathing. Matteo leaned nearer, not touching, his mouth close enough to make restraint feel far more dangerous than contact. Then the footsteps moved on. He stepped away first. No kiss. No excuse. Just the quiet acknowledgement that both of them had wanted one. As they left through the service corridor, Nora caught her dress on a brass latch, tearing the fabric at her shoulder. Matteo removed his coat and placed it around her without comment. She glanced at him. "Are you planning to buy the dress too?" "I'm trying to remember page 1 of Rosa's book." Progress. In the car, Nora reached into the coat pocket for her phone and touched a photograph instead. She pulled it free. 2 young women stood together outside the mansion, laughing beneath a summer sun. One was Matteo's mother. The other was Nora's. Nora kept the photograph in her hand until the car stopped beneath the mansion's covered entrance. Matteo did not reach for it. He simply watched her study the 2 women frozen in a happier year. "My mother knew yours." The question came out quieter than she intended. Matteo opened the door, but did not step out. "Your mother worked here before Rosa became head of staff. She and my mother were friends." Nora turned toward him. "You knew who I was." "Not at first." His gaze remained steady. "I recognized your last name after Enzo reviewed your records. I found the photograph this morning." Anger rose through her, sharp and immediate. "And you carried it around instead of telling me?" "I was trying to confirm what happened." Powerful men always call secrecy protection when they're the ones keeping the secret. Matteo absorbed the accusation without defending himself. That made it harder to stay furious. Inside, Rosa led them to the old glass greenhouse behind the east wing. Dust covered the empty planters, and several rose bushes had grown wild along the windows. Nora's mother appeared in 3 more photographs stored in a wooden box. In one, she stood beside Matteo's mother with a bandage wrapped around her arm. Rosa touched the edge of the picture. "There was an attack at a charity event 25 years ago. Your mother saw a man reach inside his coat. She pulled Elena De Luca out of the way before anyone else understood what was happening." Nora stared at the bandage. "She never told me. She didn't want you growing up believing kindness created a debt." Matteo stood a few feet away, shoulders rigid. "My family covered part of your tuition after that." Nora looked at him sharply. Until it stopped. Regret moved across his face. "My mother handled it privately. After she died, the payments disappeared inside accounts no one reviewed. So I was forgotten." "Yes." The honesty hurt more than an excuse. Matteo stepped closer, then stopped before entering her space. "But I'm not interested in settling an old obligation. Nora, what your mother did explains why my family owed yours. It does not explain why I notice when you walk into a room. Her breath caught, but she refused to let the words carry her away. That sounded almost rehearsed. It wasn't. Rehearsed things usually go better for me. Later, Nora began trimming the dead stems from Elena's roses. Matteo removed his jacket and tried to help, though he held the pruning shears like a man negotiating with an enemy. You run shipping terminals, restaurants, and half the city's private security, Nora murmured. Yet this plant is winning. It has thorns and no respect for authority. I like it already. When they finished, Matteo offered to make coffee. 5 minutes later, Nora found grounds floating directly in 2 cups of hot water. She stared at him. You don't know how a coffee maker works? There were too many buttons. Her laugh filled the greenhouse before she could stop it. Matteo looked at her as though the sound had reached somewhere no one else could. He moved closer. Nora did not step away. His eyes dropped to her mouth, and for one suspended second, the space between them felt thinner than breath. Then Enzo's name flashed across Matteo's phone. He answered, irritation vanishing as a distorted voice filled the speaker. If DeLuca wants the maid alive, he comes to the East Docks alone. Matteo's gaze snapped to Nora. She stood directly in front of him, safe. Enzo cut into the call, his voice tense. Boss, that recording was sent 10 minutes ago. An hour earlier, 2 men in a black van were waiting outside the hospital where Nora's mother was receiving treatment. They had her photograph and a copy of her work schedule. Our surveillance team moved in before they could take anyone. They abandoned the van and ran. Matteo's expression changed. Not panic. Calculation. They weren't trying to take her yet, he murmured. They were measuring how quickly we would respond. The most dangerous kind of protection is the kind that forgets to ask whether the person being protected still feels free. Within minutes, the greenhouse filled with security. Enzo locked down the estate. Rosa arranged for Nora's mother to be moved to a private hospital room under DeLuca security, and 3 black SUVs blocked the front drive. Matteo stood at the center of it all, issuing orders with such calm precision that no one dared interrupt him. Nora did anyway. Stop. His eyes found hers. Someone tried to take you. And surrounding me with armed men doesn't make that less frightening. Matteo's jaw flexed. You are not leaving unprotected. Then give me choices. The room went quiet. Nora folded her arms. I can stay here, go somewhere secure, or leave the city with Rosa. But you do not decide which one. For several seconds, the man who controlled half the room looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded toward Enzo. Prepare all 3. Nora chose a safe house outside the city and insisted on helping identify the traitor. Matteo hated both decisions. He respected them anyway. By nightfall, his response to Adrian had begun. No gunfire. No bodies. Just doors closing. A Loran-owned warehouse lost its insurance coverage. 2 banks froze suspicious transfers. 3 trucking companies canceled contracts after receiving evidence of forged documents. Customs officials placed Adrian's shipments under review. Across the city, phones stopped being answered. Men who had once toasted Adrian's name suddenly forgot it. Enzo watched the updates appear across his tablet. He'll know it's us. Matteo adjusted his cuff. Good. He may retaliate. Then he'll do it while desperate. Nora stood near the window, listening. She had expected rage from a Mafia boss. What unsettled her was the discipline. Matteo did not destroy people with his hands. He removed the ground beneath their feet. Power, she realized, was most frightening when it did not need to shout. The next afternoon, Vivian requested a supervised meeting, claiming she had information about Adrian's operation. Matteo approved it as a controlled test of her intentions. Enzo searched her, disabled her phone, and stationed 2 guards outside the kitchen before allowing her inside. Her apology came polished and bloodless. I behaved badly at the gala. Nora leaned against the kitchen counter. That is one way to describe it. Vivian's smile tightened. I was under pressure. So you threw water at an employee. You were not just an employee. The admission slipped out too fast. Nora caught it. What was I then? Vivian moved closer, lowering her voice. A distraction. One Matteo cannot afford. Because he looked at me? Because men like him confuse curiosity with desire. Nora held her gaze. And women like you confuse possession with love. For the first time, Vivian's composure cracked. She glanced toward the security camera in the corner, then stepped closer. He will choose his empire. He always does. When the choice comes, you will learn exactly how replaceable you are. Nora felt the warning, but not the fear Vivian wanted. She had spent too many years being treated as invisible to be frightened by a woman who needed an audience to feel powerful. You didn't throw water at me because I'm a maid. Vivian went still. Nora took one step forward. You did it because you knew he looked at me in a way he has never looked at you. The smile vanished from Vivian's face just as the safe house door opened behind her. Matteo stood in the doorway, and from the silence that followed, Nora knew he had heard every word. Matteo's presence changed the air before he spoke. Vivian turned toward him, and for one brief second, the confidence left her face. You were listening. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. You were loud enough. Nora expected a confrontation. Instead, Matteo looked at the security camera, then at Enzo through the monitor. Escort Ms. Laurent back to the city. Vivian's chin lifted. You're dismissing me? I'm removing a threat from a secure location. The words were calm, but the finality behind them made even Vivian hesitate. She passed Nora without another glance. At the doorway, Matteo stopped her with one sentence. If you ever approach Nora without permission again, our engagement will be the least important thing you lose. The threat carried no violence, only certainty. Vivian left with 2 guards, and thunder rolled across the hills moments later. By nightfall, the storm had washed out the main road and knocked out power to half the property. Enzo reported that no vehicle could reach them safely until morning. The safe house had 1 bedroom, 1 sofa, and a backup generator that seemed offended by responsibility. Matteo checked the windows while Nora lit candles from a kitchen drawer. You can take the bed. She glanced toward the narrow sofa. You're 6'3". I've slept in worse places. That is exactly the kind of dramatic answer powerful men give when they want someone to ask questions. A faint smile touched his mouth. Then don't ask. Nora carried a candle into the hallway and stepped on a shard from a broken picture frame. Pain flashed through her foot. Matteo reached her before she hit the wall, one arm steadying her waist. Don't move. I'm not planning a marathon. He lifted her onto the kitchen counter, then crouched in front of her with the first aid kit. His fingers stayed careful as he removed the glass and cleaned the cut. Nora watched the most feared man in the room kneel before her as though the act required no surrender. How many people have seen Matteo De Luca like this? He wrapped the bandage around her foot. 1. Who? His eyes rose to hers. You. The answer settled between them, warm and dangerous. Nora reached toward the scar near his collarbone, then stopped. May I? Matteo gave one slow nod. Her fingertips brushed the pale line above his open collar. His breath changed, barely, but she felt it. He placed one hand beside her hip, not touching, giving her space to pull away. She did not. Their faces moved closer until another inch would have become a kiss. Then Enzo's face appeared on the security tablet. Boss, I need a status report. Matteo did not look away from Nora. We're secure. Enzo narrowed his eyes. You're holding a blanket. Matteo glanced down at the folded throw in his free hand. The power is out. I understand. I'm simply documenting this historic emergency. Nora laughed, and the moment loosened before it could become something neither of them was ready to name. Matteo slept on the sofa. Nora took the bed. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. When she woke, pale morning light filled the room. The sofa was empty. Matteo's coat was gone. On the kitchen table lay a single note in his handwriting. The safe house cameras were breached. Someone inside my security team copied last night's footage. I went to contain the leak. Stay inside. Enzo is on his way. The cruelest scandals are not built from lies alone. They are built from truths twisted just enough to make innocents look guilty. By 8 that morning, Nora's face was everywhere. A clipped video showed Matteo catching Nora around the waist, lifting her onto the kitchen counter and kneeling between her knees to bandage her foot. The footage ended before anyone could see the broken glass, the blood on the floor, or the medical kit open beside them. Headlines called her the curvy maid who seduced an alleged mob boss. Comment sections were worse. Strangers mocked her body, her job, and the expression on her face as if one frozen second gave them permission to rewrite her life. Nora sat at the safe house table with Matteo's note beside her phone. It explained how the footage had escaped. It did not explain why Matteo had left her to face the fallout without a word. Enzo arrived an hour later with 2 guards and no answers. Where is he? Nora held up the phone, the edited video still playing. Enzo's expression tightened, containing the leak. By leaving me alone with it. He is trying to protect the evidence. Nora laughed once, without humor. Of course he is. Evidence gets protection. People get silence. Back at the mansion, reporters crowded the gates while staff whispered in corners. Rosa met Nora near the kitchen and wrapped both hands around hers. You do not have to face them. I already am. Nora walked into Matteo's office without knocking. He stood behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled, speaking to attorneys and security analysts. He ended the call when he saw her. The video was stolen from the safe house system. Enzo is tracing the source. And while you trace it, I get called a homewrecker by people who think my uniform makes me disposable. Matteo moved around the desk. Nora stepped back. That single movement stopped him. Say something publicly. His silence lasted half a second too long. Not yet. Why? If we release the unedited footage now, the person inside our system disappears before we identify them. Nora stared at him. So I stay humiliated because your investigation needs bait. That is not what I'm asking. You did not ask at all. Matteo's control cracked at the edges. I am trying to end this permanently. And I am trying to survive today. The room went still. Then Nora noticed an envelope on the desk bearing her mother's hospital name. Inside was a receipt marked paid in full. She looked up slowly. You paid her medical bills. Your mother needed treatment. And I told you not to interfere in my life. I could help. That does not mean you had the right. Matteo's face hardened, not with anger, but with the realization that he had become exactly what she warned him against. Nora removed her staff badge and set it beside the receipt. I'm done. He did not order her to stay. That hurt more than she expected. Rosa hugged her at the front entrance. Enzo carried her bag to the car without speaking. From the second-floor balcony, Matteo watched her leave, every instinct telling him to stop the vehicle. He remained still because forcing her back would turn protection into a cage. Nora reached her apartment after dark. The door stood slightly open. She entered carefully, phone ready in her hand. No broken furniture. No masked intruder. Only Vivian, seated calmly at the kitchen table. In front of her lay Matteo's gun. Close the door, Nora, she murmured. It is time you learned what happens to women who mistake attention for power. Nora closed the door, but she did not step closer to the table. Fear came first, then anger. Fear made her heart race. Anger made her think. Vivian sat with perfect posture, one gloved hand resting beside Matteo's gun as though it were part of the decor. You broke into my apartment. Nora kept her voice steady. That is usually where reasonable conversations go wrong. Vivian smiled. You are in no position to be clever. Nora lowered her phone onto the counter, screen facing down. Her thumb pressed the emergency recording shortcut before she released it. Then explain my position. You stole Matteo's weapon. You threatened me. I came here to reason with you. Nora glanced at the gun. And you expect anyone to believe that? People believe what power repeats often enough. Vivian leaned back. Your fingerprints are already on items from his office. The access card. His coat. Soon the gun. You planted the card. And it worked beautifully. Nora's pulse jumped, but she kept her expression blank. The shipping records too? Pride flickered across Vivian's face. Adrian handled the ports. I handled Matteo. At least, I did until you made him sentimental. So this was never about love. Love is what poor people call a bad negotiation. Nora let the silence stretch. Every second gave the recording more evidence. And the video? Vivian's smile returned. One of Matteo's security men edited it for me. The same man removed this from Matteo's office safe. By tomorrow, every camera angle will suggest you stole it. Vivian rose and slid the gun across the table. Pick it up. Nora did not move. No, the smile vanished. Pick it up, and perhaps I let your mother remain untouched by this. Nora's fear sharpened into something clean, threatening a sick woman. Very elegant. Vivian stepped closer. You think Matteo will choose you? He will protect his empire, his name, his men. You are a temporary weakness. Nora looked past her toward the dark window. Maybe, but you just confessed to enough felonies to make temporary feel useful. Vivian froze. Nora grabbed the phone and backed toward the hall. The recording timer glowed red. Vivian lunged, but Nora slammed the bedroom door between them and locked it. By the time Vivian forced it open, Nora had sent the file to Enzo. Engines growled in the street below as two unmarked SUVs pulled to the curb. Vivian fled through the fire escape, leaving the gun behind. Enzo's team secured the stairwell and the building entrances, but Matteo entered the apartment alone. No guards followed him inside. He wore only a dark coat, tired eyes, and regret he no longer tried to hide. Nora stood across from him with the hospital receipt in her hand. You crossed a line. I know. You made decisions about my life. Without me. I know that too. Matteo set no excuses between them. I know how to remove threats. I know how to protect buildings, money, people. I do not know how to love someone without trying to solve her life. Nora's breath caught, but she did not soften yet. She placed the receipt against his chest. Then learn. The payment agreement she had written was clipped behind it. Monthly installments. No gifts. No hidden accounts. Matteo read it, then nodded. Agreed. And one more thing. Anything. Nora met his eyes. We expose Vivian at the engagement announcement. Surprise flickered across his face. You want to return to the mansion? Yes. Nora lifted her chin. But this time, I am not entering through the service door. I walk in through the front. By noon the following day, Matteo's attorneys leaked a controlled message. The apartment recording had been corrupted, and the engagement announcement would proceed as planned. Vivian took the bait. By 7 that evening, the DeLuca mansion looked exactly as it had the night Nora was humiliated. White flowers, crystal glasses, wealthy guests pretending not to stare. The difference was that this time she did not wear a gray uniform. She arrived in a dark blue dress she had bought with her own money, her curls falling freely around her shoulders, and she entered through the front doors without carrying a tray. Conversations softened as she crossed the foyer. Some guests recognized her from the scandal. Others recognized the confidence of a woman who had survived being publicly reduced to a headline. Matteo stood near the grand staircase in a black suit, surrounded by attorneys, business partners, and men who watched every entrance. He did not walk toward her. He waited. Nora understood the gesture. He was not claiming her arrival. He was allowing it. She crossed the room on her own terms and stopped beside him. Enzo appeared at her shoulder, his expression as serious as ever. Before the ballroom doors opened, he clipped a tiny earpiece beneath Nora's curls. Emergency channel. Tap it twice if you cannot speak. Nora tested the connection. Matteo's voice came through softly. I hear you. Good, she murmured. Then try listening tonight. I checked the ballroom twice. Every exit is covered. Nora glanced at Matteo, who had not spoken since seeing her. And the greatest danger? Enzo lowered his voice. The boss appears to have forgotten how words work. Matteo finally looked at him. Leave. Excellent. Speech has returned. Nora almost smiled, but Vivian entered before she could. Dressed in white, she moved through the crowd as if the evening still belonged to her. Adrian followed several steps behind, calm enough to look innocent. Vivian's gaze landed on Nora and hardened. You invited the help. Matteo turned toward the stage. I invited the truth. The ballroom doors closed. Screens behind the orchestra lit up with shipping records, forged signatures, bank transfers, and security footage of Adrian entering the East Terminal. The final screen displayed blueprints of the DeLuca estate downloaded by a security officer on Adrian's payroll, the alarm controls, emergency gates, and tunnels beneath the mansion. A recording followed. Vivian's own voice filled the room, admitting to the planted card, the edited video, and the man she had bought inside Matteo's security team. Enzo had already transmitted copies of every file to a federal task force waiting beyond the estate gates. No one moved. Adrian's face lost color first. Vivian recovered faster. That recording was manipulated. Nora stepped forward. Then you won't mind explaining it to federal investigators. Adrian snapped his fingers toward the rear doors. 3 men reached inside their jackets. Before they could move further, every DeLuca guard in the ballroom turned toward them. Matteo did not raise his voice. This is my house. Everyone in it already knows where his loyalty belongs. Adrian looked around and realized he had brought threats into a room that no longer feared him. Vivian's control finally broke. She seized a champagne glass and swung toward Nora. This time, Nora caught her wrist before the water moved. The first time was humiliation. She removed the glass from Vivian's hand and set it on a nearby table. The second time would only be a bad habit. A few guests laughed, before quickly remembering where they were. Vivian stared at Nora with raw hatred. Then the fire alarm screamed. Lights flashed. Sprinklers burst above the ballroom, sending guests toward the exits as smoke poured from the west corridor. In the confusion, Adrian grabbed Nora from behind and pressed something hard against her side beneath his coat. Walk. Matteo saw her disappear through a service door and moved after them, but a security gate slammed down between the corridors. Adrian dragged Nora into the old tunnel beneath the mansion. She stumbled, caught herself, and felt the cold walls close around them. Matteo's voice crackled through her earpiece. Nora, answer me. Adrian tightened his grip. Nora forced herself to breathe, then spoke before he could stop her. Do not trade your empire for me. Static followed. Then Matteo's reply came through, quiet enough to be terrifying. You are not the price of anything. Matteo had spent most of his life believing every problem had a price. Adrian was about to discover that Nora Bennett was not one of them. In the tunnel beneath the mansion, emergency lights flashed red against the concrete walls. Adrian kept one arm locked around Nora and a compact pistol pressed against her side, steady enough to warn her not to test him. Tell him to transfer the De Luca family's controlling shares in the Eastern Terminal Operating Company, he breathed near her ear. No conditions. Nora stared at the rusted pipes overhead and forced herself to remember the service maps Rosa had shown her during fire drills. The tunnel divided ahead. Left led to the old wine cellar. Right led beneath the greenhouse. A maintenance panel sat 20 feet beyond the turn. He won't do it. Adrian tightened his grip. He already lost his father to pride. Do you think he'll lose you too? Matteo's voice came through Nora's earpiece, calm despite the static. Adrian, release her, and the controlling shares are yours. Nora's heart stopped. Adrian smiled against her hair. See? Even kings kneel when you choose the right weakness. Matteo, no. The documents are being prepared. His tone did not change, but Nora heard what Adrian missed. Matteo was buying time. Enzo would be tracking the signal. The security team would be sealing exits. Adrian dragged her toward the right tunnel. Nora let her injured foot buckle beneath her. He cursed and pulled her upright, shifting the weapon away for one careless second. She drove her elbow backward, twisted free, and slammed her palm against the maintenance panel. The tunnel lights died. Adrian fired once into the ceiling. Concrete dust rained down as Nora dropped and crawled behind a support column. Nora, Matteo's voice cut through the darkness. Footsteps thundered from both ends of the passage. Adrian grabbed her ankle, but Nora kicked hard enough to break his grip. Enzo's flashlight sliced through the dark. Matteo reached her first, pulling her behind him as two guards forced Adrian to the ground and removed the weapon. No one struck him once he stopped resisting. Matteo's power did not need revenge to prove itself. Nora clutched the front of his shirt. You were really going to surrender control of the terminal company. His hands moved over her shoulders, checking for injuries without trapping her. I can rebuild an empire. He looked at her as if the rest of the tunnel had disappeared. I cannot rebuild you. Before Nora could answer, the emergency medical team reached them. Matteo stayed beside her while they examined the bruise along her side and wrapped her injured ankle. He did not touch her again until she reached for his hand. 20 minutes later, they stood outside the greenhouse beneath the first clean air of the night. Nora lifted one hand to the scar near his collarbone. Matteo leaned closer, then stopped. Even now, he waited. Nora, may I? She placed one finger against his lips. You can ask better than that. A breath that was almost a laugh left him. His forehead rested lightly against hers. May I kiss you? Yes. The kiss was slow, careful, and chosen. No possession, no audience. Just two people who had survived a terrible night and finally stopped hiding what they felt. Hours later, cameras crowded the mansion gates. Matteo stepped before them with Nora beside him and announced the end of his engagement to Vivian Laurent. A reporter shouted, "Is Ms. Bennett the new woman in your life?" Matteo did not answer for her. He turned instead, his expression softening. That question belongs to her. Nora faced the cameras, but before she could speak, a black sedan raced toward the estate gates. Two federal SUVs closed in from opposite directions and boxed it against the stone wall. In the back seat of the trapped sedan sat Vivian, watching Nora through the glass with a smile that promised the war was not over. Vivian's smile lasted until federal agents surrounded the sedan and ordered her to step out with her hands visible. It was not the smile of a woman who had won. It was the final mask of someone who had spent her life believing consequences were only for people without money. Adrian's arrest, the forged contracts, the recorded threats, and the security footage left no room for another performance. By sunrise, both Lawrence were in custody, and the empire they had tried to steal had already begun to collapse under investigation. 1 year later, the DeLuca mansion looked different. Fewer guards stood at the doors. The East Wing had become offices for legitimate shipping operations, and every contract now passed through outside auditors Matteo had once considered an insult. Power had not made him softer. It had made him more careful about where he aimed it. Nora no longer wore a gray uniform. She stood beneath a blue awning in Queens as the doors of Bennett House opened for the first time. The training center offered hospitality courses, financial counseling, and paid apprenticeships for women rebuilding their lives after unemployment, illness, or abusive relationships. Matteo had offered to buy the building. Nora had handed him Rosa's red notebook and pointed to page 1. Instead, Nora submitted a funding proposal to an independent community foundation. The application passed a blind review, and the DeLuca Foundation contributed only after the board approved the project without Matteo's involvement. That mattered to her, because love that erased her effort would have been another form of disrespect. During the opening dinner, Nora found Matteo in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, washing plates beside Enzo. Rosa stopped in the doorway and pressed a hand to her chest. "I have lived long enough to witness a miracle." Enzo dried a glass with the seriousness of a surgeon. "Not yet. He still makes coffee like a man seeking revenge against beans." Matteo looked over his shoulder. "I have improved." Nora examined the cup beside the sink. Coffee grounds floated across the surface. "You have become more confident." "That is not the same thing." His mouth curved. A year ago, the expression would have startled an entire room. Now it belonged to her favorite quiet moments. After the guests left, Nora found him outside beneath the awning, watching the lights of Bennett House go dark one window at a time. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind. "What have you learned?" Matteo covered her hands with his. "To ask before helping." "Good. Not to purchase homes without permission." "Very good." He turned, studying her with the same intensity he had carried into every dangerous room. Only now there was warmth beneath it. "I have a question that may involve jewelry." Nora tried not to smile. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether you plan to ask the right question." Matteo lowered himself to one knee. No guards formed a circle. No powerful families waited for an alliance. There was only a former maid who had never needed rescuing, and a man who had finally learned that love was not ownership. He opened the small velvet box. "Nora Bennett, will you choose me?" Her eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "Yes." Later, people would say a Mafia boss had changed her life. The truth was more complicated. Nora had changed her own life. Matteo had simply learned to stand beside her without standing in her way. Because dignity is not something the powerful give to the vulnerable. It already exists. And real love begins when two people recognize that worth in each other, protect it without building a cage, and choose, freely, to stay.